In this video, we'll be taking a look at Redux Thunk. If you're not familiar with Redux Thunk, essentially what it allows you to do is to write action creators that will return a function instead of an action. The thunk can be used to delay the dispatch of an action or to dispatch only if a certain action is met. And we'll see why that's useful in a minute. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone a repository I've already made. And this is basically just a Redux counter. And so we have our React component right here. We have our action creators in here, our reducer here, and then the setup here. And so I go inside and I do a yarn to install all the packages. Okay, now that it's done, we can run a yarn start. Sorry, my computer is very slow. I need to get a new one. And so here we have our buttons linked to our Redux state, and so whenever I click, it will increment the state by 1, and I can decrement. Now we'll go ahead and add thunk. And so what we'll do is we'll copy this function and add it into our action creators. And so what this is doing is it's essentially waiting 1 second before dispatching our action of increment. And there's a bit more setup. And so what we'll need to do is we'll need to make sure we are importing apply middleware from our Redux. And then we'll also want to import thunk from Redux Thunk. And I haven't installed it yet, so I'll have to go ahead and do that now. And while that's installing, you can see all we need to do here is change this to reducer. All right. And so now, is that done? We'll need to update our counter component to make use of the function we just made. And so what we'll do is we'll import it. And then I'll make a separate function. And we'll have to make sure I bind this one as well. Otherwise, dispatch won't work because the keyword this will be undefined. And so we'll add another button to make use of this function. Let's say async increment. And now we should be good, unless I'm forgetting anything. So if I increment here, it'll increment right away. And if I do async increment, I seem to be missing something. And we are back. So essentially, the problem was I forgot to export the function. Silly me. And so increment right away, decrement right away. And then you can see there's about a 1 second delay before it increments. And so you're probably wondering why this is useful. Well, for those of you who are unfamiliar with async functions, essentially you might get into situations where you want to request data from a server, and it's going to take time for that data to get to your computer, and so you need a way of telling your code to wait to retrieve that data before proceeding with the execution. And so we'll actually go about implementing this, and what we'll do is we'll be pulling quotes from an API, and the quotes are from Ron Swanson, for those of you who are familiar with him or not. And so essentially what we want to do, in JavaScript you use fetch to make a request, and so we will fetch quotes from the following API. The way fetch works is that you will get a response object, and this response object has a method called JSON. This will return a promise, and this promise will have the JSON data that we want. The reason why it's a promise is because you can imagine the situation in which you request a large body of JSON from a web server. Well, then it might take a while for it to parse it. And so recall that all actions have a key of type. We'll call this action setQuote, and the payload will be the quote. Now we'll have to make sure that we update the reducer and state to make use of this. There we go. And now what we'll want to do is we'll want to update the counter component. And so we need to import our function and we'll make a separate function. We want to make sure that we connect the state here as well. Next we'll add a button to trigger retrieving a new quote. And we need to make sure that we bind the keyword this as well. And I seem to be forgetting something. Functions are not valid as React childs. Sorry about that. I forgot to deconstruct it here. And so now we can asynchronously increment the count, and we can get random codes. I've cried twice in my life, once when I was 7 and hit by a school bus, and then again when I heard that Lil Sebastian has passed. And we can get a whole bunch of these quotes. And that's how Redux Thunk works. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.